Melvin Spencer was a prisoner at a German POW camp as World War II drew to a close. Spencer had spent 14 months behind barbed wire when the Red Army's tanks rolled through the camp and liberated the captives. His story is just one tale from the 16 million Americans who served during the war. Melvin Spencer worked hard to get his parents' permission to enlist in the Air Force in 1942.
I tried to convince him that this was the safest way to go if you're going to get into the war. Turned out that was dead wrong, because I wound up in the 8th Air Force, and the 8th Air Force had the highest death rate of any of the services during World War II.
Spencer was called to active duty in 1943. He was assigned to be a navigator on a B-17.
When I was in combat missions, the average lifespan of a B-17 crew was 13 missions. 25 missions were required before you could be repatriated to the States. And so 13 was the average, and my experience was 4.
The Iowa native and his crew were on their way to Frankfurt when their group was attacked. Spencer and most of his fellow airmen bailed out at 9,000 feet over enemy territory.
The first sensation was one of just total silence and peace. I mean, it was just the total opposite from what you'd just been through in the plane.
Spencer made it safely to the ground before he was picked up by German forces. After he was interrogated, he was moved to Stalag Luft 1, a prison camp in East Germany for Allied aviators. Spencer was among the first occupants, but by the end of the war, there were 10,000 captives at the camp. Meals were sometimes scarce. Prisoners were lucky to have 2 meals a day. They were given soup, coffee, and bread.
Kriegsbrot, German bread, which was about 40% composed of sawdust and leaves, and the rest of it was something a little more edible. And it was had no fermenting, so it was just solid. It was just solid like a rock. But by the time when we got accustomed to it, it started tasting pretty good.
Prisoners passed their time reading, playing cards, walking around the compound, and some POWs would hold boxing matches. Other prisoners passed the time planning their escape.
According to their camp commandant, there were over 100 tunnels dug in the various compounds at Barth, and not one of them was successful. And there were many other attempts, and there was never a successful attempt never a successful escape from Barth, Germany.
The prisoners got their news about the Allied forces from their fellow captives.
First pictures of Singapore's taste of aerial war reveal the damage done to Raffles Square.
Some POWs had traded cigarettes for radio parts and piece by piece built a shortwave radio. They secretly listened to the BBC and wrote articles based on the updates. Finally, the POWs could hear the artillery of the Allied forces as the Russian army got closer to the camp. As the Red Army closed in, the German commandant was ordered to move. But the prisoners stayed behind, fearing they would be shot by their own planes.
On the night of April 30th, which was just 6-7 days before the final surrender, the commandant and all the German soldiers and the camp staff left in the middle of the night, surreptitiously. And so the POWs went to bed on April 30th thinking we were German prisoners, and woke up on May 1st and we were American prisoners.
2 days later, the Russian army had reached the prisoners, and the war was over for Spencer. He returned home in July of 1945.